Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. The other day, I wrote my devotional article for my church's monthly newsletter, and I began by talking about one of our two dogs. Perhaps you aren't aware of it, but about 6 months ago, my wife had a stroke. She's recovering nicely, but it's been very interesting to us that ever since, this dog won't have anything to do with her. If she goes out on the deck, this dog hightails it under the deck. This dog loves his supper and normally wolfs it down. If she takes his food out, he won't even come over to get it until she goes inside. We believe we have finally solved the mystery. We think he senses something different about her, something that isn't right, or at least like it used to be. So he avoids her. This week, we are talking about grace, and in particular, using quotes from Philip Yancey's wonderful book, What's So Amazing About Grace? And our first quote today put me in mind of our dog. Yancey was actually talking about a Bible story where a sinful man came to and was received by Jesus. As he talks about this, he shares a quote from German theologian Helmut Thielicke, who, in speaking about the same story, said, Jesus did not identify the person with his sin, but rather saw in this sin something alien, something that really did not belong to him, something that merely chained and mastered him, from which he would free him and bring him back to his real self. Like our dog sees something alien in Nan, so God perceives sin in us. But God's love for us never wavers. Through grace, God seeks to free us and bring us back to our real selves. By the way, just the other day, my wife went out to where the dog had stopped. When she got there, when she had come to him, he rolled over for her to rub his belly. Love overcomes the barriers to relationship. Just that same way, God reaches to us always and forever. In our second quote today, we have another time when Yancey is quoting another author, this time Dorothy Day. Now, she was before my time, and I understand there might be some not so good things about her. Nevertheless, these words from her make an important and valuable point. Yancey quotes, Dorothy Day put it, I really only love God as much as I love the person I love the least. As a chain breaks in its weakest point, so our love for God is only as strong as our love's weakest love. You see, God's grace is given to us all, but when we make distinctions among ourselves, when we forget that we are all the same and that we are all in dire need of God's grace, when we set ourselves up as better than thou, when our humility and meekness is lost in a spasm of self-aggrandizement, we have turned away and missed the essence of God's love. God's love is not a concept. God's love is lived out in community, community that may be next door or across the world. Resentments harbored or dislikes nurtured lead to what Yancey calls ungrace. My own Lutheran theology says that when we gather around the altar for Holy Communion, that time and space no longer exists. We are gathered around that rail with every Christian who has ever lived, wherever they lived. We are around that altar with St. Peter, with Paul, with Augustine, with Luther, and we are also around that rail with people who have hurt us, people who have done unspeakable crimes, people who are despicable. And yet the grace of God in bread and wine is given to them alike. Let me put it this way. At the Last Supper, Jesus knew who it was that would betray him. And still, Judas had a place at the table. That's how deep God's grace is. That's the grace we are invited into. In our final quote for today, Yancey says, "Grace is unfair, which is one of the hardest things about it." We live and struggle with the idea of fairness. We want things to be fair, and usually that means for us when what we are looking down on. Let's try that sentence again. We want things to be fair, and usually that means for us that we are looking down on someone else and don't think they should get what we get. Or we might feel shortchanged in some way. However, as we have said over and over this week, we are all in need of God's grace, and we all receive it in God's love just alike. And just like those workers in the vineyard who worked all day and got paid the same as those who worked only 1 hour, we complain that it isn't fair. But if you remember the end of the story, the owner said, "Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" When we get caught up in fairness, we lose sight of the generosity of God. I don't know about you, but sometimes I need that generosity. God's grace is an amazing grace indeed. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.